All right, good evening. It is August 10th, 2022, and we're going to spend a couple minutes talking about football auction leagues, which is at least the way that it's being approached here is a new way of draft, quote unquote, draft leagues in strat football. And we're starting a league, I believe the first of its kind, called the Strat Football Auction League. We have 20 coaches set, ready to go. We'd like 24, ideally. It's all said and done. So a few more slots are available. And what makes this different? I mean, just looking at the website, looks like we have somebody joining. Hey, Lawrence, how are you?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Me and you so far. Just starting out here. And just going through the website, which is stratauction.com. So we're a Stratimatic Pro Football League, as it reads here, that auctions players against a salary cap from the latest football set in a unique format that maximizes the GM experience while maintaining playability and simplicity. Okay, so it's not too complicated. And we say here we utilize technology that makes the player allocation process fast, and that's really the difference maker. When I first got into draft leagues, I started strat like most of us when I was a kid. But when I first got into draft leagues, first for a computer, I was mostly in stock leagues about 10 years ago. And I got into Frozen Tundra. Hi, Vinny. Welcome aboard. We're just starting out, me, you, and Lawrence so far. When I first got into draft leagues maybe 10 years ago, I just assumed that there would be an auction league. It surprised me so much as I got into draft leagues that you could draft somebody and like a traditional draft. And we got Butch joining too. Hey, Butch, welcome aboard.
Good evening. Thank you.
And these are all coaches in SFall. Just saying, Butch, when I got into draft leagues, I was so surprised, just only 10 years I got into draft leagues, that there was no auction league. I couldn't quite get it. From coming from, fantasy football and certainly rotisserie baseball, I mean, auctions were the way that you allocated players. And it also surprised me that you could keep players forever, right? With no penalty, you just sort of have them until they die. Not that it's a bad system. It's a great system. And I'm in draft leagues and I love draft leagues. But I remember early on writing Dennis, who's also in our league here, saying, hey, where's an auction league? Why isn't there any? And then he came back and he said, look, of course there'd be some, but the technology is not there. That initial auction, it's not like fantasy where you're filling 20 roster spots, you're filling 50. And that initial auction would take days upon days upon days upon days to get through it. And how are you going to do it? You're going to do it on Slack. I mean, and people, you do a big conference call for 50 players and 20 teams. It's just too much. And he was right. You're absolutely right about that. So ever since then, I've always been pining for an auction league, but the technology just wasn't there to handle it. And a couple years ago, I got just looking around, always looking for the technology. I came across this site, draftysports.com, and it seemed to be able to pull off the technology, which makes the big difference. And we'll go through that technology in a second. But I think the first thing we want to cover is what is the league? What are we doing here? Of course, it's an auction league, live auction. We'll auction off a full roster, and you get $650 to allocate among your team in a silent auction. The structure follows along very closely to Rotisserie Baseball. And here's the original Rotisserie Baseball from way back in 1983 or whatever. So it's a structure that probably a lot of you are actually familiar with. In Rotisserie Baseball, we follow basically all of those same precepts, which millions upon millions of people have played Rotisserie Baseball. So it's approachable, it's workable, but you can really manage a team and GM a team in a very unique way that we're just not doing as a community right now in strat football. What does that mean? That means with that $650, and let's say you win an auction for Patrick Mahomes. Okay, and let's say you win him for $60 or whatever it might be, 60 out of your 650. That 60 would be deducted from your 650, and you'd have to fill out the rest of your roster with $590. So sure, if you want to, it could be different than a draft league. You can get Mahomes and you can get Derrick Henry and you can get TJ Watt. You can do that. You couldn't do that in a draft league because obviously everyone else would take it in front of you before the player came back to you. You can do that here, but you're going to pay a price for it.
Yeah.
Are those stars worth it or not? Are they not worth it? Because you're going to have that much less to spend as it goes on. Well, what happens to Patrick Mahomes? So let's say you get Patrick Mahomes and you have him for $60. What does that mean? Well, not only, of course, do you have less money in the auction, but that becomes his salary, quote unquote salary. And when the season ends, as I'm scrolling down here to the player example, right here, and our charter can be found right on the website. Here it is. So we use 67 instead of 60. So let's say you get Mahomes for $67. That year, you keep him for that 67. He's on your roster. Well, the season ends. What happens next year? Well, you can keep him for a second season at that same 67 if you'd like. And when you go into the auction, your roster will already have Mahomes on it. It'll already say 67, and you won't have 650. You'll have 650 minus 67 to spend. And you can keep up to 40 guys. Okay, up to 40. And that's on purpose. You can't keep your whole roster. And the reason we do that is because you want to have some movement, player movement of veterans, not just the rookies, every auction year. Okay. So let's say you keep Mahomes for that second year. In that second season, he's 67B. That's A being his first year, B being his second year. And then after that second season is when, at least for our league, you have an option. That's the option time after that second season. You can cut him if you want to, and no questions asked. He gets released, no penalties, no nothing after the second season. You can keep him one more year at 67, and you'll know at that point, if you keep him that third year for 67, he's back in that fourth auction, no matter what, after that third year. You've given up your option. Or you can exercise your option to sign him to a longer term deal. So you can get him for not just that 1 year at 67, but you can get him for an additional year. So a total of 2 years. But his salary is going to go up. If you do that, his salary would go from, it'll go up 25 because he's a quarterback. Quarterbacks go up a little bit more than everybody else and go up to 92. So in that third auction, instead of having $67 deducted, you have 92 deducted. And in the auction after that, since you signed it for a 2-year deal, you have them again and again for 92. The last option is you could have at the end of the second year is assigned to a 3-year deal, which would mean in total you've kept him for 5 years. If you do that, his salary goes up by not 25 but 35, and his salary goes up to 102. So that's a pretty steep salary to pay, 102 out of your 650. Okay, but you can get him for 5 years if you do that. And each of those next 3 auctions, he'll be at 102 deducted until after the 5th season. There's nothing you can do at that point. He'll go back into the auction after the 5th season. That 6th auction, he go back into the auction as a free agent. And the free agents and the rookies get pooled every year, and there's a great mix of them every year that come in. It makes it a lot of fun. It's like the draft and the free agent, signing period rolled into one. And you can do a pretty good job of rebuilding your team pretty quickly. You can also do a pretty good job of building a dynasty if you played your cards right. 5 years is not a short amount of time. 5 years isn't a long amount of time either, but it's long enough where you can build a dynasty if you play your cards right, especially if you can prospect on the lower dollar players and sign them for a few years. You might say, well, okay, we got 1,000 players, certainly in this first auction, right? We have a lot of players. In the second auction, well, most people are going to keep their 40. So there's a lot fewer guys out there, but you have all the rookies and you have all the free agents coming on. So you usually get a good mix. And the other benefit of that is that it's a much quicker process. Our auctions, except this first one, our auctions should take about 2 hours max because of the technology. All the rookies are out there, but the technology really keeps it moving fast compared to what we're used to with Slack drafts. I mean, all of us are kind of know what that's like, right? I mean, you get into that 5th or 6th hour, and you're like, holy mackerel, let's wrap this up. And this thankfully has a nice feature of being able to reel that in a little bit. A couple years ago, we first started thinking about doing this. This was about 2020, so the 2019 card set. And when I did it, I put together, just for the people who were interested, my view of the values of those guys coming out in that 2019 card set in the 2020 year. And made it work, made it balanced. In other words, these are all the if you allocate all the players, you have all the salary, have a lot of $1 players all the way down here, which you're going to have a lot of them, right? Small dollar guys. You have to, if you're going to have $90 guys at the top. This is what the values look like. Time, Mahomes 91. I don't think he's worth 91 anymore. 2 years on. And Josh Allen at 85, which would not have been a very good deal. Probably would be cutting him, given the way Strat's carding him right now. Had Deshaun at 71, Lamar at 60 at the time. Remember, this is a couple years ago. Rodgers at 56. That would have been a bargain. Ramsey at 55. TJ Watt at 55. So you get the idea. The star players pretty much are going to float. The biggest star players are going to float around 50, probably. We really don't know because we haven't done this before exactly like this. But like I said, rotisserie baseball has been around for a long time. We're basing it off even the values that were used in rotisserie baseball, meaning the average player is the same here as it was there. So the average player is $11. And I never saw a guy go for more than, I think, 77 in all my years of using this auction system for both baseball and fantasy football. So 50 is typically where the stars go. I imagine that's where the stars would go here too. But it creates such an interesting challenge as a GM to go through, value these guys, and make these decisions versus a draft. Like I said, I love drafts, and I'll stay in draft leagues forever. But this is a really interesting way to look at it. Any thoughts, guys, as we move on? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think this will end up, I'm sure, being my favorite league, just because the auction thing is a dream thing where you really can get who you want, and also with that turnover of being max 5 years, it keeps things moving, so it doesn't get kind of weird. Like the FDL, I think it is, the Cave Creek or whatever. I didn't like that league because it was like a dynasty that would never go away. You can only keep so many players, but he's trading, getting all these extra picks. It would just seem like somehow the structure didn't work well, I don't think. But this will take care of those problems. I have a question though. How will it work? What will happen if somebody either doesn't show up for the auction or has to leave early?
Well, we need to have somebody there to auction. So if they have to leave early and they leave 5 guys, then they'll be able to pick up what's left at the end. That's not an issue. Yep. So that's happened before, as you can imagine. I mean, everything that could happen has happened. If any of you have played rotisserie baseball over the years, I mean, you've seen it. I mean, somebody's got to leave early. Something happens. The wife this, that, the other thing. And typically they'll just have whatever they have left. They'll come back and fill it out. And you'd be surprised too, Lawrence. some of the best bargains that I've ever seen have come from guys who left early and picked up the pieces, and they turned out to be stars. Yeah, at $1, interestingly. But your point about other cap leagues and whatnot, the major difference is the live auction. So I've looked around at different cap leagues just because I was interested in it versus draft, and generally there's things like you assign a salary for where someone's drafted, or the commissioner goes in and assigns salaries top to bottom, or you use the salaries from real life, all that sort of thing, right? And you assign it, and you either draft against the cap, right? That sort of thing. You're typically not going to auction. Here, we're determining the values live in real time, based on how you feel about the player, if you want to get the player or not. And that's what made rotisserie baseball great. That's what's made auction fantasy football great.
Like, what will they pay for Russell Wilson?
Dennis, what will you pay for Russell Wilson?
What won't I pay for Russell Wilson? That's get the question backwards. No, I don't know if you guys have covered it, but what's up with the assigning of the D cards? I saw like 29 only to get excellent pass and 31 to get excellent run.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that right now. Let's focus on the auction versus other aspects. That particular thing I've been going back and forth on. So we'll table that conversation for the moment.
Okay, because that's a big deal to me.
More interested in what you want to pay for Wilson. Just share that number right now.
It's a blind bid, so you guys have to wait and find out. No, you remember some of these guys are in the middle of their career, so it's not just the fact that they have a certain level of talent or certain quality of card. It's how many of those cards do they have left? You know what I mean? So I'll be more interested to see what the younger quarterbacks go for. Yeah. Who might have their whole career in front of them.
Yeah, 5 years maybe. So you may not get their peak.
That's true. Yeah, you might have to wait for that.
And conversely, what does Brady go for when you know you're not going to get him for very long, right? Yet you're going to get a great card this year, and you're probably going to get a card next year. After that, who knows, right? I mean, you could the strategy, obviously the strategic approach you can take is endless here, where you can go for a Brady and try to go bargain hunting, right? And just try to rotate, knowing some QBs are probably coming back in. It's not quite like draft leagues where QBs become these just coveted things that you just hoard best you can. You could go with the strategy of picking on veterans cheap. Sorry, someone's going to say something.
The big feature I like about this league too, maybe it's true for other ones, but I also like the fact that that if you bid high, you really say you really want Russell Wilson, and you bid $100, you're not going to have to pay $100. You're just going to have to pay $1 more than the second highest bid. And so that person's not going to go $95 probably. It's going to be lower.
That is a good point, and that is a good segue into this, which is how we set up the auction itself. And I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I think it's good just to get an idea of what the technology is. And I talk about this site a lot, and people actually think I own it and stuff. No, I don't own it. I have nothing to do with the site. I just finally after 10 years that there's a site that can handle this. So you could do drafts in here too. I mean, I think eventually this is going to be good for our draft leagues too. Okay, for a variety of reasons.
I was thinking about doing it for my hockey league.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't need admin, Vinny. You don't need a timekeeper. All that stuff goes away. Anyway,
and towards the end of the draft, it will turn into a snake draft or just a pick draft because everybody will be out of money at some point, and it's just like whoever nominates him for $1, nobody will be able to top him. So when you get to the very end, and everybody's got their roster full except for 3 or 4 coaches, and they all spent their money, and they only have enough room to spend $1 per player, it kind of does turn into a draft, a straight draft.
Yes, at the very end, and in that last couple, the last hour or two of this very big auction that we're going to have, people's max bid is going to be you're going to be looking around. Okay, who has a max bid that's higher than mine? Because if you have the max bid out there, then you get anybody you want if you really want them, because you'd have that highest max bid. And what's nice is the system tells you what everybody's max bid is. You don't have to track that manually. It just tells you, Dennis's max is 15, my max is 17. Especially if you're competing with a player for somebody in particular who also needs a cornerback, that last 4 cornerback or DB or whatever. Okay, I have an edge on that guy. That's what I'm going to save my money for. When that guy comes up, I'm going to bid my max at 17. The rest of my guys will have to be $1 after that, but you'll know what your max bid is. And we'll get to that. Go ahead.
What's the name of the site again?
DraftySports.com.
DraftLeagueSports.com.
Drafty, DRAFTY. sports.com.
Like I said, we're thinking of using it for my new hockey league, so it's a good site.
So I'm just going to stroll through the options here real fast, so everyone can sort of get familiar with it. 24 teams, of course, we have, and it populates the 24. And of course, they'll all be named and whatnot when the time comes. You can put any roster size you want in there. We're going to have 55. You can put some positional maximums in, which is nice. It's built for fantasy football, but it works for our purposes. at least for QBs and kickers. And we do have some positional maxes. Not the time for that discussion, but that option is there. Gives you the option to drop the players while you auction them. We're not going to do that option. And then the best thing, I mean, really what changed the game is that you can do your own custom auction list. So all the players of Strat are in here. Okay. And you're going to notice that I've added like a little bit of an extra field next to these guys. For each position, there's a key stat next to it. Okay. So for the quarterbacks, you see their attempts, and that's going to be listed in the auction. You'll see it in the mock auction in just a second. For the backs, also put their carries. For the receivers, use the autumn wind formula, the oops formula for reception value, max of 24. Okay, so Cooper's at 18, the 6-5-4-4 thing. For tight ends, you get it's interesting. I've changed it since here. We have the run block plus you have the receiver value for tight ends. That's the way it's going to be. And you can see here for the offensive lineman, you see Brian Kelly's a 6-7. So you can see that. And that's going to be really important in an auction, especially this first auction when you get the defenses, because you're going to be trying to build to your defensive rating, and you might need a 4, you might need a 5. You don't have to go streaming through a draft list off to the side to see the 4 or 5s are out there. It's going to just be listed right there. You'll see who's out there and what their ratings are right in the auction. So we stroll through all the players here, and you'll see a bunch more options after this. Here we go. What's nice is the nominations. We as the coaches nominate the players in the middle of the auction as it's going along, and there's a list of guys who are going to be nominated soon. That saves a ton of time versus if any of you have been in auctions before, typically whoever wins the previous bid has to nominate somebody, and that takes 30 seconds. That takes a minute. That makes a huge difference not to have to wait that 30 seconds or a minute when you're auctioning these guys. Boom. Instead, it's going to take it from that list, and that next player automatically gets nominated, so the thing just keeps moving. We can set a time limit for how long everybody has to bid, and we're going to either set it for 30 or 40 seconds. We're still sort of deciding on that, at least for this first session. It'll probably become a little bit shorter toward the back end. What does that mean? That means, let's say it's 30 seconds. Patrick Mahomes is up. We all have 30 seconds to get our bid in. Once everybody's bid in, even if there's 15 seconds left, it'll just boom, award the player. You don't have to wait the full 30 seconds. But everybody gets that 30 seconds to figure out what they want to bid. So it's very important that you come armed to the auction with something like this. How you value these guys. You have 30 seconds to work with. You do need a list of what you estimate their value to be. The value may change during the draft. You may get different views as time goes on, but you definitely need a starting point. You don't want to figure that out while you're in the middle of the auction.
I guess the ratings guide could help with that, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's the way you value players. I think we'll have a whole separate broadcast about valuing guys and putting that initial list in there, really. Putting your initial list together. In the initial auction
teams, Anthony, we have 24 now.
We have 20 currently.
Okay.
This is the auction file, the first auction file we're sending around, and this is all the players that are available. We put a little feature in here that's going to let you go ahead and value the guys, put a number in. Let's say Tom Brady. Let's just call it 50. Probably won't go that high, but Brady 50. And off to the side here is an auction worksheet. It lets you know that overall, this is as it currently stands, we have 1,100 roster spots to fill in this initial auction, right? Because it's the first one. Nobody has anybody. And that means there's 13,000 total dollars out there. So as you go ahead and fill in what you think these guys are going to go for, this little worksheet is going to tell you, okay, since I've gone in and filled in the first 3 guys here at the top, you've allocated 3 guys, Anthony. That's me. I'm Anthony, by the way. And the salary is that you've allocated to them is 120. You have 1,097 left for guys to value, and you have 12,880 to work with. Ideally, in preparation for this auction, you're going to go through and you are going to balance your auction. right? You're going to go through and value everybody, and at the end, you're going to have 0 guys left to allocate, and you're going to have exactly 0 salary left. That means you have a balanced auction, and you've got values that make sense. If you just value everybody at $50, obviously it's not going to actually turn out that way because there's not that much money out there. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now
So-
you're sending this sheet out to everybody?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Today or tomorrow. Our bid increment's $1. You can have a max bid rule, and then we like that. That means that you are going to know in the auction, like we talked about before, what every opponent, everybody else, what their max bid is. As the auction goes on, that's a big deal. Lawrence mentioned the stewardship rule earlier. What that means, especially for people who are new to auctioning. Let's say somebody's new to auctioning and they bid 150 on Mahomes. Shouldn't do that. Don't do that. And the next guy, the second highest bid was 60. The stewardship rule means the $150 guy, the guy who bid 150, he's going to win him, but he's going to win him at 60 plus 1. Whatever the second bid was, plus 1 is what his actual salary is going to be. That just levels the playing field a little bit for anybody who's brand new to auctions.
So we're not using the Deshaun Watson rule where you're wasting $200 and whatever million.
Not doing that, hopefully. Tie break rule is kind of important. So if 2 people tie, what happens? Well, we have it set right now where the 2 people who tied for him, or 3 or however many, are the only ones allowed to bid when you go to the next round of bidding to determine who gets him. Not everybody. Not everybody gets a shot, just the guys who tied. And there's so many others, but we're going to create the draft room here.
Hey, Anthony, is it just one round of bidding if there's no ties?
Yes. If there's no ties, it's done in 30 seconds or less. And here's what the actual draft room looks like. Okay. And here's Brady in his 719. I can get him in the nomination queue. Start the draft. Get him in the nomination queue. There he is. I can get a couple other guys. All of us can nominate one guy at a time, and it'll show up. And then once it starts, the clock begins. Here it is, 20 seconds. I'll put my bid in, whatever it might be for Brady. Lock my bid. Since everybody else is there, no one else is actually bidding but me, it's going to take the whole 30 seconds.
Well, you got to think it's going to take the whole 30 seconds every time, because the chances that everybody's going to bid on one player is pretty minimal. I mean, there's going to be guys that come up like, I don't want him. I already got my starter at that position, or I'm going to wait and save my money for somebody later. So
what you need to do is lock your bid in at 0. That'll keep the draft moving.
But again, people are, I'm going to go to the bathroom on this player, or I'm going to go get a drink on this player. So yeah, I don't think everybody's going to bid on every player.
Don't go to the bathroom. Don't go to the bathroom unless we have breaks. Okay, you can ask for one if you have an emergency. But generally, Dennis, how we get around that? I mean, the practical way for 95% of the guys is that you lock your bid at 0. Okay? Lock your bid at 0, and that'll keep it moving.
And how many rounds are we doing the first day?
We do, the first day we're going for a number of hours, and then we're coming back on the second to finish it off. And there'll likely be less time for each player in the second. Now,
you guys say it, I'm good for it. I'll make time for it.
Yeah.
And that's basically it. Now you can imagine how it works for a draft, right? And of course you can do drafts, and we're not here to talk about drafts, but where is it? Right here.
Did you want? I mean, Anthony, would it mess things up if we all were given that link, jumped into the room, and bid on a couple of players just to demonstrate how it would really work? Or does that count as one of your drafts?
Well, I think for the purposes of this video, we're good, but we're definitely going to do that. We're going to have some mocks to make sure that happens. If you do a draft, there's a lot of interesting settings. Like you could do a draft where it's a 24-hour clock. Some of us are used to email drafts, where you just have to email each other and you have a day. That actually accommodates that too. That is the crux of it. Once you fill your team up, then you have a team just like you do in regular Stratimatic football. and we go out and we play the season. What's particularly fun is trading when you have the dimension of salary and contract status attached to each player. That makes it's a whole new dimension to trading.
And it opens up a whole new dimension in strategy, I think, too. Because I mean, I could go out there and put up 5 Seahawks to drain Dennis's money. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I mean, there's strategies you could take. You can put up guys that you don't want, that other people you figure want, and just bid them up. Let them bid and save your stash for later on down the line.
That's exactly what
I really like this, and like you said, Anthony, you can take Aaron Rodgers at $60 and dump him next year and get $60 back and pick somebody else.
Yep.
You can turn your team over year to year.
Yep.
Which some of us do by trading.
Say again?
Which some of us do by trading anyway, but
yep. Over time, the best teams are going to be the ones, just like you're managing, an actual team in sports. I think the guys who can get a core at a really good value, and then that gives you the money to go shopping in free agency and get your star players, right? And you can, if you have a core that's under $20 that you did a good job getting them at good value, then you can come back the next year and you can spend big and really round out your team.
Yeah.
And we drafted 55 players, you said?
Yep, 55. Yep, to fill out the roster the first year, right? And every other year we keep 40. I think we've covered everything for the purposes of this video. Do you guys have any other thoughts or questions for the purposes of this video, which is just to tell a broader audience about this league? It's not about, it's not about the particulars of our particular league per se, but just the concept of auctions.
Looking forward to it for sure.
Sounds good.
Me too.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Appreciate
everybody hopping on. Like I said, we had 20 coaches so far. We'd like to have 24, so just 4 slots out there. We will be auctioning at the end of September. We are definitely accommodating, because all of us play in draft leagues, so we're accommodating those that play in draft leagues, and we're scheduling around those drafts to make sure that the dates work for everybody. So, all right, thanks for joining, everybody. Appreciate it.
And have a good night, gentlemen. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Take care, everybody.